Hey guys, Steven from KR Motorsports again. Just wanted to show you our mess of a dyno. So a lot of my longtime customers know that we've had an all-wheel drive dyno for a really long time now. And so we're finally breaking it down for maintenance. For the longest time, I was renting out dynos, especially when I first started tuning. I was renting for a long time, and at that point it made financial sense to just go ahead and buy one. So this one is our old Dynacom DC 5000 all-wheel drive. So what I wanted to talk about was the biggest issues I see with dynos all the time. And you know what that issue is? Owner-operators, 100%. A lot of these owners are buying dynos and they're not properly calibrating them, or they're not setting them up correctly, or they're not just straight up not maintaining them. So our dyno is completely apart. We're putting new bearings in them, right? And then the biggest one, excuse the mess guys, our shop is always messy, is this one that people never ever talk about for some reason, and it's the rollers themselves. So our DC 5000 has the small rollers. We actually just sent our rear rollers off to get redone. So if you look here, this is what's called knurling, and you can see that our knurls are really worn down. So these knurls like used to be really tall. And so the only way that you can actually fix this is one, replacing the rollers, or two, sending them off to get them redone. So we've got this 18-inch section redone here. This is done by a company called Carbinite out in Pennsylvania, and their turnaround time is pretty quick, but this was relatively expensive. To get our 4 rear rolls done in the Carbonite, from Carbonite rather, was about $3,000, shipping to and fro from Texas to Pennsylvania and actually getting the job done. So these guys actually did, once they received it, it took them about, I'd reckon about a week to get it done, but this is definitely done. And so people are wondering why only 18 inches. The truth of the matter is that if we had went 1 inch further in either direction for a full 20-inch length, it would have cost like another 300 bucks. And so we thought about the widest tire that we would see here, which is generally about a 315. You know, we would definitely not even be this wide. The only downside of this is that if you have an extremely wide car, it may not sit perfectly on the rollers. So a lot of times, and we noticed this, was that cars were getting really trumped up numbers. So, you know, cars that normally, like a 370Z for instance, right? Normally on our dyno, when it was still relatively fresh, these cars were only seeing like 260 to 280 wheel. Other people's dynos were showing them at 330, you know, something insane. And then suddenly over time, we would come in and we'd do dyno test, and suddenly they would start seeing those higher numbers, right? We would have cars that would get tuned, and then they'd come back and they would just want to put it on the rollers, just to put it on the rollers to just see where they're at, and they would suddenly start making more power. So then we realized that, hey, there's something not right here. We were getting away with using the tire spray, you know, what guys are using at the drag strip and stuff for extra traction, and that was fine. But suddenly that just wasn't working anymore, and something had to give, and that's these rollers. So we decided that it was time to take it apart and finally take care of it. So the thing about dynos is that they're a calibrated tool, you know, just like torque wrenches, and people never ever check their torque wrenches for whatever reason. You know, a dyno's no different. So, you know, you hear stories about, oh, the Dynojet reads higher than Mustang dynos, blah 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 blah. In the end, it really doesn't matter. So long as the results are repeatable, you should be able to do 2 runs back to back, and they should be within each other, pretty close to each other as far as numbers go. But sometimes you don't see that. I hate to say it, for all you guys that are starting to tune, you really need to check with whoever you're renting the dyno from and ask them, like, hey, when's the last time this thing has been serviced? You know, are the numbers repeatable? You know, these are questions that have to be asked. Something as simple as strapping the car down incorrectly can trump up these numbers. Even tire pressure will do it. So if you're doing gear ratio where you're not actually hooking up like an RPM input from the spark plug wire or OBD2 port, you get tire blow up, meaning that the tire expands as you do the run. And that will change your gear ratio. That will shift your numbers around. And these are things that people never ever address, and I absolutely hate it. You know, a tool, a dyno is an expensive tool, and people just are not maintaining them. And you get guys that make 700 horsepower on one dyno, they'll go to a different shop and they'll make 900 horsepower. So which one's the accurate one? Nobody knows for sure, because nobody ever wants to maintain them. So I wanted to talk about, if you look at our front rollers, it may be hard to see in the video, but these rollers in the front are barely worn. We're all-wheel drive, obviously it's an all-wheel drive dyno, and it's linked. So there's actually a pulley system back here on our dyno. So if you look here, obviously it's apart. This sleeve will actually move back and forth between two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. So our bread and butter is Subaru. We do a lot of Subaru, but our actual bread and butter is really Z cars, really. So all-wheel drive does get some usage, but it's definitely not as much as the rear-wheel drive cars do. So our front rollers are relatively fresh still. But the rear rollers, as you guys saw, were just completely bad. The knurls on them were basically completely flat. Whereas like you can look at this and you can still see that these are still raised and they're not flat like the old ones were, or the rear ones were rather. So it's just something I wanted to talk about. Something that really irked the hell out of me a lot is that when you're renting a dyno, especially, like I said, especially when you're first getting into tuning, talk to the owner, talk to the operator of the dyno, ask them how long it's been done. They do go bad, they do wear down, you know, and because of that, you can't get accurate numbers. So just something to think about. Until next time, guys.